Good morning, everybody. I'm Richard Welland, IAAF President, and it gives me great pleasure to launch our very first IAAF Service Provider webinar. Today's webinar will explain the major issues the automotive aftermarket supply chain faces around recruitment and skills, and what as a businesses and individuals can do about it. It will also look at the challenging trends and attributes in the recruitment sector, specifically in the post-pandemic era. Today's webinar will be recorded. If you have any technical difficulties seeing the screen or accessing audio, please be advised that the best browsers to use are Google, Chrome, or Firefox. There is a technical support online at support.goto.com/webinar. We will take an hour today, 40 minutes for discussions hosted by Mark Field, IAAF Chief Executive, and around 10 minutes for Q&As at the end. Please use the chat function throughout to ask your questions, and we will endeavour to answer them either during the discussions or towards the end of the session. Today, we're joined by Andy Hill, Dealership Recruitment Specialist and Director at KPI People. Welcome, Andy. Glenn Shepherd, Director at Glenn Shepherd Associates. Welcome, Glenn.
Morning, Richard.
Morning. And Gavin White, CEO of Autotech Group. Morning, Gavin.
Morning, guys.
I'll now hand over to Mark to begin the session.
Thank you, Richard. Good morning, everyone. Delighted to have you all with us today as we commence the first of our IAAF service provider webinars. And I'm going to waste no time and get straight to the burning questions within our industry. And thank you to those who have already sent in questions prior to the webinar, and we'll look to cover as many of those as possible. Glenn, if you could kick us off in our first section on recruitment, just explain to us and the audience what are the trends or the key trends that we're seeing right now in recruitment?
Okay, morning, guys. Hope you're well. Mark, thanks for the question. I mean, in terms of trends right now, from our experience, the market is becoming very much more candidate-centric, and but I think it's candidate-centric for a number of reasons, really. I think we need to look at the data to understand kind of what's happening out there. I mean, in quarter three, we worked with some of the major job boards, and they estimated that 1.1 million vacancies were posted in quarter three alone. So that's the most ever since records began in lots of ways. So as we can see, there are lots of vacancies out there. Unemployment in January registered 4.1%. So again, the numbers are coming down in unemployment. So, as we can see, that a lot of people are employed out there. The candidate market, in our opinion, candidates are in high demand, not just in our sector, but also across many other industries. So inadvertently, what that means is that we're now having to compete with other industries, to find candidates and bring candidates into our sector. And I guess the biggest challenge that we're seeing as a business right now is what we call the middle skills gap, where we've had people that have gone through early retirement. We've got the apprenticeship schemes that Gavin's going to talk about later coming through, but then we've got this skills gap in the middle, the immediate skills gap that needs to be filled right now, and that's the biggest challenge, and that's one of the trends that we're seeing right now.
Thank you for that. And Gavin, sort of building on that point, and coming out of the post-pandemic period, we are at a very strange time, aren't we, in that there are so many vacancies. And what trends are you seeing in terms of your recruitment activities?
Well, we've certainly before we went into the pandemic, obviously there was a lot of migrant workers coming over from Europe, and I think it's been compounded even further with we had Brexit and the pandemic going on at the same time. Now, as with the industries and businesses are starting to open back up, those migrant workers aren't coming. Obviously, one, because of immigration reasons, which have been enforced upon us by the government. But secondly, they're not travelling because they can't because of COVID, even if they wanted to in some countries, because everyone's got different rules. And our industry was very reliant on that migrant workforce beforehand. So, and truth be told, this issue's been burning for a couple of decades. The migrant workers really were a sticking plaster to what was quite a nasty sore underneath that needed dealing with, but the industry as a whole just wasn't dealing with it because it had a fresh supply of, should we say, quite lowly skilled and cheap labour coming in that we were getting by. But that's not coming in any longer. So now the plaster's been whipped off to obviously reveal what is quite a nasty sore, and there's no tonic for that sore at the moment. If sorry to make it sound a bit gruesome, but at the end of the day, we're dealing with quite large organisations that don't have a strategy. Everything's short term. Everything's very much. We're talking about what's your medium to long term fix for this, whether that's apprenticeships, temporary workforce, permanent recruitment. People just don't appear to have a strategy for it, which is quite alarming.
And Glenn, that's something, this isn't exclusive to one particular area of recruitment. You talk about strategy quite often, don't you, in terms of where you see that middle skills gap, the need for a strategy there, because as you said, candidates are in really high demand at the moment.
I mean, I think one of the dangers as well, Mark, is that we have some excellent employees within the aftermarket, etc., and they're not immune, to being approached from other industries. And part of the problem, when looking at some of the stats here, 26% of the UK workforce are proactively looking for jobs. Numbers are significantly down. People proactively looking for jobs. 52% of people that moved have actually moved industry as well. So, I think again that puts more pressure, on recruitment, because at the end of the day, we're also not immune to people taking our staff too. So, you're dead right. Strategy. What can we do? What can we do to put ourselves in a more positive position, whereby we can actually put together a plan where we can go out and consistently recruit good staff, at all levels. And at the moment, as I said, we're very proactively involved. A lot of our clients, when they come to us, they want the finished article. They're looking for the solution to fit right now. They can't afford to wait 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They're looking for a solution right now. So again, that leads itself to looking at, well, if we're fishing sparsely populated talent pools, then what can we do? Where can we go? What should we be doing? So I think it's important to understand the data and look at the data, and then from there you can start to formulate your strategy moving forward.
And the IAAF virtual conference in 2020, which you kindly spoke at, you asked a question or a poll to the audience, which looked at the correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest deciding factor with regards to job or career choices, and I think was it job security that was number one, and it was a kind of a sea change to where we'd been. And I think in that sort of pandemic or height of the pandemic we were in, that there was a need for obviously recruiters, companies to change their whole focus in how they not just recruit but how they look after staff for the long term.
Well, I think we're getting back to sort of candidate behaviour and understanding, what do candidates want and what do they look for when they're seeking jobs, and that whole dynamic, is constantly changing. Maybe the traditional way of recruiting was to place a job advert, select CVs out, find someone who, a selection of people that are suitable, and interview against the job brief. Where it's kind of turned on its head now, candidates now becoming more savvy in terms of what they want out of a career, out of a job, and also it's becoming more of a need for the employer to understand what candidates are looking for. So not only are candidates needing to tick employers' boxes, but employers need to tick candidate boxes right now. And if you can understand what candidates are looking for and what their behavioural traits are when they're job searching, you can actually tailor your strategy accordingly to make sure that you're becoming an employer of choice and an enabler, rather than sort of sticking to the same old strategy that's worked for years. So I do think there's a need for change, and I do think that building a solid candidate engagement strategy is key, across the board.
Andy, I see you agreeing with Glenn there. Have you seen, I mean, in the past 2 years, that change also with the types of roles that are available?
We've found, certainly post-pandemic, that middle management's the area that's actually slowed down quite a lot. It's the foot soldiers that everybody's after. And exactly, and Glenn and Gavin just said, because of various pressures, that pool is diminishing quickly. Other industries are picking off, and it's meaning everybody's fighting over a smaller talent pool. So that does need correction. I think as employers generally, agencies and the end users need to be a little bit more open-minded at what we look at, and that's what we talk about long-term strategy. If you're purely going to be trying to recruit experience within the field you work, there will simply not be enough people to do that. So,
and I think Andy as well, you know, you've hit on a great point there, because you know, it's managing client expectation, you know, because, you know, I guess sometimes, you know, not every client that we work with understands, you know, one of the most popular questions I'm asked when we take on board a new opportunity is, you know, what's the temperature like out there? What's going on in the market? And you know, sometimes, you know, it's very difficult, because when you're looking at very specific fields, you know, the number of candidates available could be relatively low in terms of the client expectation. So, you know, that's a real sort of you know, problem to manage, and it's a real you know, barrier that you have to overcome. So the way that we've kind of approached that is through maybe looking at allied sectors. You know, what sectors can we go to that mirror the aftermarket or the automotive sector, where we could perhaps nick transferable skills and bring people across into our industry. I mean, I think we've got a fantastic industry, you know, that we work in. We're all very passionate about it, and you know, part of what we're trying to do is to introduce fresh blood into the talent pool.
Thank you for that, and thank you to the audience for their questions that are coming in, and please do use the question function or the chat function to post those. We've kind of touched on this, Gavin, but from what Glenn has said, from an automotive company's point of view, should we be looking in then a bit more wider in terms of how we bring people into the trade? I mean, we're going to move on to skills a bit later on, but obviously the two go hand in hand, skills and recruitment. But do you think that there is possibly a reluctance on the industry to sort of branch out a bit further, to even promote itself into other areas?
I think there is. I mean, our industry is huge and it's very diverse. You know, when I talk about the automotive sector as a whole, you know, apologies, I've got very sensitive automatic lights that seem to be, unless I'm waving my hands around, going on and off. But you know, it's a very diverse, lots of people are very siloed within it. So, you know, as you well know, Mark, you know, I do a lot with the NTDA, the IMI, you know, various different trade associations within the sector. And I think actually just on that point, I think there's something like 48 different trade associations in our sector. So I think that tells you exactly some of the issues that we face within our sector. Everybody's trying to do what they're trying to do in a silo, and I think actually we need to start taking more of an industry togetherness and view on this, and sort of kind of put the swords and shields down and leave it at the door type situation, and actually work together, because it's all within our interests. You know, I know we'll talk more about skills and education, but we do a huge amount of work with schools around the Milton Keynes area where we're based, and you go into schools, and I think as an industry we've been guilty of expecting people to come and work in the motor trade, because we had this, you know, this time or era of great brands, you know, and, you know, big OEM, you know, Mercedes, BMW, they're all brands that global brands that people recognize, that wanted to work for 30, 40 years ago perhaps, but that isn't the case anymore. You know, those brands don't have the pulling power that they once had. Yes, they're very still big global brands and very, you know, very great companies, but, you know, people that are coming out of educational areas now are they're talking about Amazon, Google, these sorts of stuff, when we're not even at the table. As an industry, we're not even there. We're not even close. We're not even at the door of the schools or stood outside to talk about it. And I see that on a day, You know, when we go around Milton Keynes, you've got all the employers there, and when you consider how many VMs head offices are in Milton Keynes, all the businesses who are in the schools talking about education are Western Power, British Telecom, John Lewis, all these other big brands, but they're there. Anyone from the motor trade there? No, not at all. Not one individual's there talking about if you want to get into marketing, if you want to become a lawyer, if you want to get into logistics, you want to become a vehicle tech, a salesperson, an accountant, you could do all of those jobs in the automotive sector if that's what you want to do. But we're not even there. We're not even flying the flag. And I think that's the real problem that the industry has to tackle. We've got to get out there together and start flying the flag.
Yeah, and going back, it's a great point, and we've had a question, Glenn, which is probably aimed more towards technicians and technical staff, but are we seeing salaries being affected by this whole demand, this whole change that we're going through?
Yes, I mean, I think, you know, like any other commodity, you know, when there's scarce resource, it pushes prices up, you know, and you know, the employment market is not immune to that. So I think the two areas really to cover there. First of all, you know, good employees, companies are trying to retain and hold on to, so they're going to pay them more to keep hold of their employees, which is raising the bar when someone is recruiting for a like-for-like type position. Secondly, I think when we go down the recruitment, and one of my guys has asked me to talk about this, you know, because building into your strategy, you know, and you've asked me about post-pandemic strategy, which I'll cover shortly, but you know, counter offers, you know, we've never seen so many counter offers, you know, in 23 years that we've seen probably in the last 12 months, because companies are so desperate to hold on to really good and really trained and knowledgeable staff. You know, so the answer to the question is yes. You know, salaries are very, very volatile right now, and it would be very difficult to draw an industry average right now because they're so up and down depending on where you are in the country and what type of discipline and what type of role it is.
Andy, do you see that?
We do, yeah, counter offers all the time. And if you're part of a large organisation, one counter offer to firefight one member of staff leaving is having an impact across their whole business if they're doing it properly and ethically. You can't pay one person more than your 100, 200,000 other employees just to keep that one person. So that is having huge pressures on the salaries. I think from a low ebb, to be fair though, I think the industry has been set well below industry average for quite some time. And I think the pressures of Brexit, the reduction in the talent pool is just pushing salaries up and up and up, and we're having to react and get them back up to some kind of level where they probably should have been some time ago. I think pre-pandemic, I would say the industry was behind the curve already, and I think it's now just being exasperated.
Right, okay. And just we're going to just come to the end of this section, but Glenn, and I'll start with yourself. Questions that we're getting in all the time, but what's the first thing that a company should do, you know, in terms of their recruitment strategy in January 2022? What's their sort of checklist that they need? Okay,
there's 6 things, right, that I think, you know, can help. And first of all is looking at recruitment and integrating that into your marketing. You know, candidates are becoming more savvy now. They want to research online. You're very visible as a business. So, you know, bringing in recruitment and integrating that into your marketing is key. Point 2, be an enabler. You know, tick candidates boxes. What are candidates looking for now in certain disciplines? You know, can you offer flexible working? Can you offer remote working? You know, can you improve work-life balance for your employee? You know, there are lots of things that you can do to tick candidate boxes, and I think you need to be very aware of that as an employer. 3, sell your culture and your employer branding and your appealability, because at the end of the day, you know, candidates want to join, you know, good cultures and organisations that carry very strong cultures. I think we did a poll back in December, and you know, by far, you know, the point that candidates were really interested in was strong cultures and employee focus. Point 4, candidate engagement strategy. You know, gone are the days where you place an advert and people, you know, respond to that advert and you select your candidate out. yeah, the trends are telling us that candidates are uploading their CVs to job boards, they're uploading their CVs to various social media sites, and they're waiting to be found. Finding people now is not the issue. That's the easy bit. Engagement is the key. So candidate engagement strategy is really key to this. 5, move quickly, don't prolong. Good people are being stacked up. If you prolong your process, you're going to lose out. You need to move quickly. And then 6, I think, which is one of the most important parts, is once you've gone through all that process, what's your onboarding like? How do you onboard candidates? How many times have I been in an interview where I've interviewed someone that's left the business after 2 or 3 months, and why have you left? Well, the job wasn't as described at the interview. So I think once you've gone through the pain and the process of putting your recruitment strategy in place, protect your return on investment, make sure that you onboard candidates and that you keep talking to them and you retain what you've just recruited. So if those are the 6 points, they were probably the key 6 points that I would sort of advise companies to do right now.
And taking those 6 points, in particular the culture, is that easier for a bigger company or a smaller company to do?
Either. It doesn't need to be. In fact, in some respects, some of the strongest cultures that we work with, are still independently owned businesses, because they've got the ability to make very quick decisions. The aftermarket is as we all know, it's a very reactive market. Things change very quickly, and being able to adapt to that is very, very important. So, whether you're a large corporate or whether you're an independently owned business, you can drive your culture. The people that work for you and the people that are involved in your business, they're driving your culture. They're going to want to make other people join your organization. So I think it's really important that, whether you're big, small, large, or medium, that you focus on your culture and developing that culture where, you become the employer of choice and people want to come and work for your organization.
Gavin, would you like to expand on any of that or add a few more points?
Yeah, I think at the moment, I mean, just to give you an example, I think a couple of weeks ago, one of the consultants in our business come over to me to tell me a story. I'm not going to name names, but it's a dealership. They were looking at a technician. The service manager turned up 40 minutes late for the interview and then proceeded to interview the individual in front of the customers in the customer waiting area. It's like, really? But this stuff still goes on, and more regularly than you can imagine. I'm talking like day-to-day, but scenarios. And for me, it's just craziness. Then we wonder why, as an industry, we have a problem when we've still got actions like that happening. So I think, there's some very basic things that can be fixed quite quickly. We're not sitting here talking about going out, Glenn's right. All those things that Glenn mentioned is absolutely bang on and spot on. But, just simple basic things. And to pick up on Glenn's point as well, we've put lots of people into various roles, and, you do the regular ring round and, is the candidate's uniform ready? Is there someone there to meet and greet, and he's coming on the start date? Yeah, we know all of that, and it's all good. And the candidate turns up, no one knows he's coming, his uniform's not there. Straight away, it's almost as if like either we've lied as the agency, which doesn't do our reputation any good, or the employers lied to them. So straight away, you're on a wrong footing before you've even started. So the candidate's sitting there going, well, hang on a minute, I'm in a hot market. I know I can demand a premium for my services, and I can't even do basic things like that, right? Like getting my uniform here on time, and they've told me it is, but it isn't. And the manager, my line manager, doesn't even know I'm supposed to be starting today. To me, they're just basic things. And we're not talking about spending hundreds and thousands of pounds on marketing strategies and that. Just get the basics right,
I think the candidate journey, Mark, Gavin, I concur with that. The candidate journey is really important, because the process can switch a candidate on, but it can also switch a candidate off very easily, and good candidates as well sometimes. So, getting back to moving quick and, making sure that your process is quite thorough and informed, I think is imperative, when you're trying to hire in a market, where there's, the scarce, candidate availability.
And Andy, the point that Glenn makes in terms of the onboarding process, that obviously the recruitment process doesn't finish on day one of the candidate taking the job. And obviously with that whole culture change that we've got now in terms of, there are so many options available for that individual. We have to be very effective, don't we? Not just for the first week or the first day, but for the first month and the next 6 months in terms and longer.
I think it goes even further than that, Mark. Talking about long term.
Oh, we may have lost Andy a little bit there. So, Gavin, do you just want to pick up on that point in terms of the longevity, in terms of how we onboard people?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that. The strategy piece is, when we talk about a recruitment strategy, it's not just about engagement. It's about that hire, train, retain piece along the whole journey. I'm actually sat, again, apologies that lights keep flashing on and off. I'm sat at a training facility today up in the Midlands. Fantastic facility, paint and body. There's no one in it. This is clearly a multi-million pound investment that a big organisation's put together in terms of skills and training and apprenticeships. No one in it. So, and we're all sitting here saying we've got skills and recruitment issue. Yeah. Well, we need to. The strategy has got to be, there's got to be a starting point, but then there's got to be a whole journey through that engagement. We can't just expect people to say chuck money at it, because chucking money at it in terms of salaries aren't going to fix the long-term problem. That's a short-term view, in my opinion.
I think go on, sorry.
That's okay.
I think the other thing is it's a little bit like our industry. I don't think there's anyone here now that has left school and said, you know what, I'm going to carve my career in the aftermarket sector. We end up here, in an amazing industry, but possibly it's not what we planned from day one. So, and we are competing with other industries now. So, I think we need to, go out there and really, tell the world really, what type of opportunities are available. We've got some fantastic careers, we've got some fantastic brands and businesses to come and work for, and I think, we need to be more proactive and go out there and compete with other industries and let them know exactly what we're all about. And just to give you an example, I mean, we've recently done some work where we've worked in some alternative aftermarket areas, and we've brought people in from the likes of Yellow Machinery, within engineered solutions, engineered machinery. All these businesses have aftermarkets, they have replacement parts, they have distributors, they have buying groups. So there are some real sort of strong synergies with some of the markets out there. Where there is some real good available talent. We need to go and tap into it and bring some fresh blood into the industry.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you all. That brings us to the end of our recruitment section. So I want to move swiftly on to skills. And Gavin, if I can start with you, the skills shortage, the term, I know you've talked about reasons as to why it is happening, but can you just explain to us what it really means, what it actually means? Because obviously we see shortages in all our daily lives now, and it's played out in the national media in terms of, started with HGV drivers, but obviously there was, a decade or two of why that was happening. So can you just sort of break it down for us in terms of the skills shortage? Are there not enough people to fix cars anymore, or just go into that for us, if you may?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, it's quite a broad term, skills shortage, and I think a lot of people just accept it as there's not enough bodies. I think one of the biggest drivers the industry faces at the moment is technology. Technology is driving a different type of individual that's required. Certainly from our point of view, from the technical side of the industry, you've got an aging workforce that are leaving the sector. There's more people leaving it than there are coming into it. And what's happening is you're seeing, certainly for young apprentices or young people coming certainly into workshop environment, they're not getting the opportunity to work with those engineers, if you like, or vehicle technicians that have had 30 years worth of knowledge. So it's not that they've gone and sat in a classroom and done a qualification or something like that. That's not necessarily the skill shortage. The knowledge is there, but they're not picking up the knowledge from working with people in that environment because they're just not there. So as they're coming into the sector, it's like, well, okay, yeah, I know how to do certain amounts of the work, but it wasn't like when we were growing up, when you perhaps used to shadow someone and someone would then say, well, you follow me around for the next 6 months and I'll basically download everything I've learned in the last 30 years down to you over the next few years. And we're seeing there's a big gap. And naturally, I think, if I'm being brutally honest, a lot of what's being taught, certainly within college environments, unfortunately, isn't what the future needs as well. You know, for an example, we were chatting about this about a year ago. You know, you go to a lot of training establishments, and because of the way that some of the standards are written for our sector, you know, you're still getting individuals that are gapping points on carburetors and stuff like that. Well, that's great, but that's not what we need moving forward. And having spoken to one of our large, should we say, factoring clients, we were like, well, how many sets of feeler gauges did you sell last year? Taking into account they probably sell billions of pounds, billions of parts every week. They were like, yeah, I think we sold 2 sets online whole year. So that was probably a couple of guys who were just historical car collectors at home or something. But what we're teaching individuals for the future isn't in line of what we actually need. That's the problem. You know, we need.
Is that where I mean, how do we solve this problem? It's you know, multiverse of so many different things that we need to do, but education seems like it's a good start.
Absolutely, and I think this is part of where the industry needs to come together. It's the lobbying piece. So I suppose, you know, apprenticeship standards were ultimately there for, now the way they're written and the way they're set up is for trailblazer groups and for employers to have more of a say in terms of what's actually needed. The problem is when some of the initial trailblazers come out, you had quite a lot of, should we say, people that were sat around the table making decisions that wasn't necessarily for the better of the whole sector. It was probably how they saw it from their side of the fence. So, you know, do the standards need reviewing? Do they probably need a bit of a shake-up? Yeah, they do. Do colleges need to be getting better, or, you know, training establishments need to be investing in more equipment? Does there need to be more funding from the government for that sort of stuff? All of that's only going to get driven further forward if, providing the automotive industry gets together, there's one voice that's driving that to lobby government or lobby wherever it needs to be, you know, lobbied in terms of the awarding standards and that. And we've got to make that change. We've got to get down around the table, all of us, and speak up, because if we don't, we're just going to be getting more of the same, which isn't going to fix the problem.
Andy, do you agree with that in terms of obviously us being much more forceful in what we need?
Yeah, I think so. Gavin talks from a real strength with regards to the technical side of things. A lot more of our side is customer focused, customer service side. That I think is actually a possibly an easier skill shortage to actually bridge. I think, as Gavin says, that the investment in the technical side is there. Whether or not what's being taught is correct is a different matter. With regard to the customer service side, so the service advisors, the parts advisors, I think there, on the whole, is just a genuine lack of investment. There's a little bit of in-house training. There are some very good outsourced providers, but you speak to someone who's joined a service department, be that independent or franchise dealer, very, very rarely will they have been on any formal training in their first 6 months of employment. You know, whether that's residential, on the job, or out there. So I think from the customer service perspective, I think there's just a lack of investment, generally speaking, on the whole.
And Gavin, in terms of how we, and this is a question that we've already been asked by the audience, but in terms of how we look to bring new people, younger people into our trade, is it a case of us obviously looking at not just improving our education, but looking at our promotion of a future career, because it can be very varied. You can work in all forms, as you mentioned earlier on. I think in terms of, it's not just technicians and mechanics. You can do obviously work with motor factors and distributors. You can work with a supplier. You can get involved in sales and operations and marketing. Do we need to obviously be better at promoting that whole variety of roles available?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we went to, going back to the, I think it was Ousdale's school we went to at Milton Keynes, with some of the other big brands, John Lewis, Western Power Distribution, BT, and there was like a round robin classroom scenario, and they had probably about 60, 70 delegates in each of their room. We were the automotive room, and we had about 30 delegates. So we only had about half of the delegates that were in the automotive area compared to everybody else. Whether that was just because it was Autotech Recruit there and they didn't necessarily see any value in terms of what we did versus the pulling power of brand power of John Lewis and that. But having spoken to actually the careers tutor there, who, when I spoke to her, I said, so what's your journey been to become a careers tutor at school? Well, I left education, I went to university and then come back in as a careers tutor. Okay, fine. So, have you worked for, no, I've not worked for anyone else. So, okay, so you're advising students on industries they should be going into that you know nothing about. Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so, I mean, these are subjects, Mark, that we're not going to fix overnight. This is pretty a deep issue within that goes all the way down to grassroots. But actually, once we myself and Mandler spoke to the young students in this environment, we had about 10 of them come up to us afterwards and said, do you know what, I didn't know that I could do all of those things in the motor trade. I was like, well, what do your careers tutors actually talk to you about? And they said, well, they don't. They basically just say, either go to university, or if you're not bright enough, go to university, go and get a job in construction or the motor trade. So basically, it's almost setting them up to fail, or us as an industry, if you like, being sent the people that, the message is wrong. The message is wrong, and somehow we need to fix that. We need to educate these people within schools and education providers to be saying, hey, we don't necessarily, and I don't want to be detrimental here with the wrong folk, but we don't want the dregs. We want the IT engineers, we want those people, because that's what we're going to need moving forward. I read an article yesterday about a man who's got a Tesla. He leaves it plugged in overnight and actually has redone the software. I don't know how this works with his warranty, but redone the software to basically mine Bitcoin. So while his car's parked on his drive, it's mining Bitcoin for him, and he's earning £800 a week through that. So if someone at home's managed to be able to deliver, but they are the people that we need working in the sector moving forward, because ultimately the cars of the future are going to be these with one with a wheel on each corner, not people. We don't want Dirty Johnny, unfortunately, who sat in the corner, who's got no interest and he's just been pushed down a road that he doesn't want to go down, because it's all about ticking boxes from an Ofsted point of view so people can claim their SFA funding. It's wrong and it needs to change, because unfortunately, unless we speak up, we're going to just keep getting more of the same.
He may have lost some Bitcoin over the weekend because it dropped a considerable amount. But Glenn, in terms of that sort of movement in where our audience congregates, is something you said earlier on. It's not something that that we are used to, is it? In terms of our industry, we need to be a bit more digital focused, because that's where our audience is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, some of the vacancies that we're handling now, and we've seen a big increase, probably since the during the pandemic, where things have kind of moved from maybe more sort of features, benefits to data and trends. And we've seen a lot of IT related type roles. Even business development roles now. Companies are looking for candidates, individuals that can manipulate and work with modern technology. And get the most in. How can you sell something? How can you gain engagement and impact through a video? You can do it, but it's a skill. So I think there are a different set of skills being developed post pandemic. Where companies now are going to use that and use those skills, use those technologies that are available to them to help them, sort of make their organisation stand out.
Yeah, and Andy, as Glenn points out, we can't moan about a skill shortage. I mean, we can, but we've got to do something about it, haven't we?
We have, and I saw an interesting stat actually the other day, and it's actually quite logical when you think about it. When we talk about millennials, we talk about technology, people's views being different. By 2025, so in 3 years' time, 75% of the working population will be millennials. Millennials were born in 1984. That's the start of the millennial period. So we've really got to, it's not just the brand new starters, we've got to appeal to everybody. And it was quite an interesting article, and 5 main considerations. First 2, standard, money, security. But number 3 and number 4 were flexibility in the working day. They look for flexibility, and actually studies have shown off the back of that, they'll actually work harder for you. So people talk about the millennials being work shy. Actually, if you engage them, they're the hardest working, longest hour working staff you'll ever find. And fourthly, with regard to personal development and the use of technology in personal development, it's not all soft skills. Use technology to engage them, and actually it makes them more efficient. So you actually we're talking about salaries going up and this constant trying to level it all out. You've got the people, invest in the technology, and your efficiencies, whether that's as a technician, a service advisor, a parts advisor, in any walk of life, your efficiencies will improve with the right investment, and that will more than outweigh the investment you put in.
I think
you're right.
I think the other area, Mark, and just to show absolutely right, what totally concur with what Andy's just said. But the other area as well that candidates are looking for, and one of the areas that we see all the time is they want to see the needle move. They want some autonomy. They want to be able to influence and shape decisions, depending on what level that is. And I think at all levels now, people want to see the needle move. They want to see if they're putting some effort into a job or an opportunity, that something's happening at the end of it. And I think that's one of the biggest frustrations that we see coming through our doors with candidates that carry out their daily tasks, and they're just not getting they're just not seeing the needle move, and that's the frustrating. So again, when you get back to planning your strategy for recruitment, these are all important areas that you should be focusing on to train and retain your people, like the guys have just said.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just got something to read out to you from the audience, and I'll come to you, Gavin. But somebody writes that they've been waiting 3 years for my local school college to invite me into the school to discuss careers in the aftermarket. Career officers are not interested in pushing the levers in our direction. They have no idea of the opportunities. Do speak to myself and obviously IAAF, because I've been into a school this week and I'm going into a college next week, and we are knocking down doors. And I will, having been in this industry for 23 years, I will promote this industry to anyone that will listen, and even those that won't listen. So you do please don't give up and do get involved. But I think, Gavin, it's a perception, isn't it? And it's all perception about people, perception about our trade, and that's not easily changed overnight. But collectively, it can be reversed.
Yeah, I mean, half reach out to the guest who's obviously put that comment on, because I was actually with someone yesterday who said exactly the same. That they wanted to, the local school reached out to them. They said, yeah, we'll come in and talk about, oh yeah, we don't want you to talk about the oily stuff. We want you to talk about the cool techie stuff, which is great, but that's not representative of the whole industry, So, and actually, when you look at it, it's because what schools and colleges are being told by government data is incorrect data. So what they're trying to do, schools and colleges, is obviously put their students in a position where they're going after high tech jobs that's going to give them high pay. But like when you speak to the careers tutor, and going back to the lady in Milton Keynes who knew nothing about the motor trade and was actually quite, not rude, but disparate about vehicle technicians. It's like, well, yeah, it's not a particularly highly skilled job, is it? And stuff like that. I said, well, okay, how did you get to work today, if you don't mind me asking? Oh, come in my car. Well, what do you do if it breaks down on the way to work then? you go, oh well, I'll call the AA. Well, how do you think that person got trained and where they, you know? I said, and this is the problem. People don't value the service that they're getting, and
No.
I think as an industry, we're guilty of that because it's very competitive out there. I get it, but when you're still driving around and it's £19 for an MOT test and come and get a tyre for £5 or whatever it is, we've developed this race to the bottom culture, and because we're marketing ourselves so cheap as an industry, you can't get a gas engineer now to come and take a boiler off the cover off your front boiler for a couple of £100, and that's for him just to turn up in your driveway and press your Ring doorbell before he even comes in. So and then God only knows what you're going to get charged for a PCB board or a pressure valve that might be faulty. But because they've structured their sales opportunity correctly in the first place, they've got more money then to reinvest into training and skills and paying the right salaries. I think some of our major issue is because we just price ourselves too cheap in this industry. We undervalue what we do for the consumer that's out there, which is ultimately the general public.
Yeah, I totally agree. Glenn, I'm going to bring you in there and just to follow in because we've had a question. Building on what Gavin has said, do you think that the introduction of some of the new software and technology around electric vehicles and hybrids will help attract more people into this sector?
Yeah, I mean, with regards to technology, EV, not specifically, but definitely, I think as one of the IAAF briefings that I went to recently, I think it was at Gavin's place. There was an individual there talking about white glove technicians. The technician of the future. He's going to be someone that's switching things on and off. From an IT-based platform. We're actively involved with things like recruiting things like SaaS and developers, and so I do think that the modern tech careers are going to be on the increase. Certainly within the aftermarket as well, because obviously with what we've got happening, with what you guys are doing, lobbying at government level for right to repair and access to information and stuff like that. The aftermarket is going to require people that can use this information and use these tools and technologies. So yeah, that's one to watch for the future for sure.
Thank you very much. And Andy, anything you want to add in there in terms of as we move to sort of sum up now in terms of our activities necessarily that we can do to change perceptions, to look at where our opportunities lie?
Well, just stepping back from one on the question, a bit like Gavin said, with regard to the new technologies, the EV, I think it is very appealing if we communicate it to the school children, to the current apprentices, and actually get it out there, because we know EV's happening. We know that technicians need the level 3 hybrid and EV, but do the general public know that's happening? All we talk about is electric cars being registered. The press doesn't go any deeper. We don't communicate any further. So I think that is a hugely appealing subject matter for new starters, but we've got to actually do a much better job as an industry at getting that across and letting them know it's available to them. Yeah. It's not oily anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And we had a comment on that. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, just to finish off on the point I made before, going back to the school situation. The data they're being given by government, which is falsely making them make the wrong decision. I think there was they would provide some ONS data or Department of Educational data that they give to the schools, and they were saying, on average, a vehicle technician starting salary is somewhere in the region of £17,500. Well, I don't know any technicians that are being employed for £17,500. So naturally, schools are veering away from pushing good quality students into this industry because they've been given the wrong data about our industry. So that I quite know how we fix that. I think trying to lobby government will get that data right, where they're getting it from their sources. I mean, back when I started this business 15 years ago, you couldn't get a really good MOT tested vehicle technician inside the M25 for less than 21 grand. Well, Nowadays, you're talking 35, 40 grand, and I would imagine in the next 5 years, you could be talking 50, 60 grand. So the rate it's going. So, you know, there's some key things that, you know, individuals are being wrongly informed about our industry, and people are making the wrong decisions, you know.
And it sounds, I mean, the IAAF launched, we launched something last year, which was, we called it IAAF Aftermarket Careers Pathway, and it's still quite early days, but it's growing in terms of its popularity, because I think you're right in terms of, yes, we have to go into the schools. I'm having a different experience to the person that's put there, but the colleges, first and foremost, want us to go in there and talk to them. They also want to come and visit the businesses, whether it be garages, distributors, motor factors, dealerships, manufacturers and suppliers in the UK, which is great, so they can see all the varied roles that take place there. And similarly with the schools, hopefully we're starting to see something where they're looking at what alternatives there are, and not just sort of in what we call probably traditional, but the varied career that the motor trade can offer. So I think you're right, Gavin. I think we have to start somewhere, and I guess we have to start in the schools as much as the colleges, don't we?
Mm-hmm. I think the other area, Mark, as well, with regards to you know, making our industry stand out is you know, some of the allied sectors, maybe for the more experienced people, the middle skills gap that we've talked about. Because I mean, we do a lot of work in that area, and when we start talking to people about, you know, this is an opportunity that we're handling in the automotive aftermarket, and we explain what the aftermarket's about and some of the players and so on and so forth, you know, when we're talking to you know, candidates that are not traditionally from our sector, you know, there's quite a lot of interest, you know, and I think if we can sort of, you know, appeal, you know, not only to the apprentices and people coming in, but also there are careers there for, you know, people that are seasoned professionals, you know, and we can take some of those opportunities and develop them into and fill, you know, the middle skills gap, you know, because that is the biggest challenge, you know, in my opinion, that is facing the aftermarket right now, is the here and now. You know, people are looking for solutions and they want it today. You know, so and there's a massive opportunity, you know, to bring fresh blood in with, you know, very, very good transferable skills right now. If we communicate it right, we get our strategies right.
Yeah, and I think that the marketing plays a big part in that. And as you said, the middle skills gap, but also with bringing people in. And I think, you know, we look at hopefully a calendar of events this year where we can reach and see people face to face and talk in a post-pandemic period. So thank you to everybody who's posted the questions and comments, and I will come back to you all individually if I haven't answered them today. But I'd just like to hand over now to Richard if he wants to just say a few words and possibly sum up on the scale of the problems that we presented today.
Yeah, I think it was great. It was just some really good questions, and you know that, yeah, this does conclude the IAAF service provider webinar. I mean, it's the first one we've had, and I think it raises some really good content and questions, and certainly something, you know, just listening to these guys, the experts, that Mark and myself, we've both got kids that are of the age that can be influenced. Now ours may know what they want to do, but what surprises me when I have my son's friends around and I say, over the last 12 months at 17, what do you want to do? Half of them say, have no idea. They have no idea. So there are, you know, opportunities for us as an industry to get in and talk to those people. But I do think it's an IAAF-led initiative that we can do more, Mark. I think, you know, I'd certainly welcome going into schools. You know, I'd do some more of that. I've done it in my own son's school. But I think we need to do more of that stuff, and I think we can help ourselves as an industry to put ourselves out there more, because I don't really see an awful lot of what makes our industry sexy to kids. And if you talk to youngsters that are looking to leave or do their exams, they're looking at things like Apple and all the names you've mentioned today. And is it, well, I want to go and work in a garage or want to be a technical engineer? But they should be. You know, I've seen courses that or apprenticeships that Tesla are now doing, and other car manufacturers, and you know the salaries are very encouraging. But I don't think there's enough about what that is, how to get involved in it, and I think it's the normal stuff that that schools see, and I think we've got to educate them. So yeah, that's my two penneth. I think we've done a great job, guys, in raising the profile. The IAAF is here, led by Mark and myself, to try and help, and we will do anything that we can. And if you want to feed us information to spread the word, then that's what I think we need to do, and get target lists of schools or whatever we need to do to try and help the cause. But I want to thank everybody, the panel, and obviously our audience for listening. And this has been recorded, so we will send it out shortly. But thank you, Mark, for hosting this. It's been a great event, and we will have more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.